Keanu Reeves could never have imagined that an ordinary flight would turn into a real test. A rude, restless man in his 60s seemed determined to ruin the trip for everyone on board. But what happens on that plane will not only change the troublemaker's attitude, it will also leave a deep impression on everyone around him. Ready to find out how the calmest actor in Hollywood managed to pacify a fiery stranger and what lesson we can all learn from it? Friends, before we begin this story, I kindly ask you, please support the channel, subscribe, click like, and leave your comments. Your words of encouragement inspire me to create more and more interesting stories. Now make yourselves comfortable. We're about to embark on a journey that's filled with drama, moments of laughter, and important life lessons. Keanu Reeves stood in the spacious hall of a large airport. It was early morning in an unnamed city, soft light filtered through the huge glass facade. Everything on the outside seemed calm, yet inside there was the usual flurry of pre-flight nerves. People moved toward check-in counters, glancing at their phones and at the big screens displaying flight times. Keanu, dressed simply in a black t-shirt, dark jeans, and comfortable black sneakers, blended in with the crowd, carrying only a small piece of hand luggage. Some passengers passing by looked at him a bit more carefully, as if trying to decide whether he was indeed that famous actor, but no one was quite sure. All around, it felt like a stage where each person had their own role. One might be anxious about missing a flight, another might be arguing with a travel companion, a third might be cradling a baby in hopes it wouldn't cry too loudly on the plane. Somewhere in this swirl of small dramas, tension was already building around a single individual. The source of the disturbance became evident at one of the check-in desks. Raised voices could be heard, and before long, a man in his 60s began shouting angrily. His face was flushed, and he looked ready for a fight with the entire world. He was complaining about the employees' supposed lack of professionalism, blaming them for everything from slow service to the confusing layout of the airport. The staff, used to stressful encounters, still appeared taken aback by his hostility. Passengers standing nearby exchanged nervous glances, not wanting to become the next targets of his wrath. Keanu noticed this scene. He'd seen his share of disagreements and knew sometimes a gentle word could defuse a situation. Yet he also knew there were times when anger was just a symptom of something deeper. He moved closer, listening. The man's voice rose. "I'm wasting all this time, and for what?" he yelled, waving his hands. "You people can't do a single thing right. Who's going to answer for the delay? Who's going to reimburse me for lost hours?" The crowd edged away. Even the airport employees looked like they'd rather not provoke him any further. Keanu could see a young female staff member struggling to maintain a polite demeanor under the man's barrage of insults. Her eyes showed fatigue and embarrassment. Meanwhile, other passengers shuffled around, trying to avoid the confrontation. Keanu decided not to turn a blind eye. He approached in a measured way, though still unsure if his intervention would help or just make things worse. "Excuse me," he said calmly, "there's no need to be so upset. We've all had moments when our plans run into problems. I'm sure we can find a way to sort this out together." The man spun around, glaring at Keanu. He clearly did not appreciate unsolicited advice. "And who are you?" he snapped. "You think you can tell me how to live my life? Maybe you work for this airport, too?" Keanu remained unruffled. "I'm just a passenger waiting for a flight, same as you," he replied quietly. "Then keep out of it if you know what's good for you," the man growled. Keanu glanced at the staff member, whose eyes were brimming with weariness. His own sense of compassion wouldn't let him simply step away. He decided to remain close by, hoping his presence might help keep the situation from escalating. As the line progressed, the man continued to rant. Keanu moved over to the employee, quietly asking if she was okay. She simply nodded, grateful for the concern but unable to openly admit she was overwhelmed. All the while, the man loudly berated anyone who crossed his path. It was as though he drew satisfaction from venting his frustrations on the entire world. "Why are you even working here if you can't organize proper service?" he shouted. "Your cameras capture nothing, you say? Who's going to pay for this chaos? I pay for my tickets and end up losing time." Some people in the check-in queue exchanged uneasy glances. One woman finally stepped forward and attempted to defend the staff. "Excuse me, but you're only making things worse with your yelling. We all just want to get on our flights." "Who are you to tell me what to do?" the man retorted. "Maybe you enjoy wasting hours at the airport, but I have important business to attend to." She shrank back, shocked by the verbal assault. Keanu, sensing a powder keg moment, cut in again. "You have every right to be upset, but maybe we can find a constructive way to address your concerns. Perhaps you could speak to a senior manager or file an official complaint. When you're shouting like this, no one can really help you." "Oh, so now you're giving me advice," the man raged, shifting his focus back to Keanu. "You think I don't know what to do? You're all useless around here." He then jerked his carry-on off the baggage scale so violently he almost knocked over an employee placing signage nearby. The atmosphere grew tense, as though the slightest spark could ignite a bigger conflict. But the man's fury seemed to lose momentum after that. He continued muttering angrily, but the yelling subsided somewhat. His eyes, still filled with anger, darted around, looking for the next target, but found no one. When he glanced at Keanu once more and saw only calm in the actor's face, his frustration flared again. Despite the tension, the check-in line moved forward. Keanu had already checked in online, but he remained near the desk to ensure everything was all right for the workers who had been verbally attacked. One employee quietly thanked him. "Thanks for sticking around," he whispered. "I don't know who you are, but your calm attitude probably saved us from worse trouble." Keanu just gave him a polite smile. He never liked taking credit. Meanwhile, a string of new complaints poured from the older man, who soon headed off to the security checkpoint. Many in the area sighed in relief once he was gone. For a while, Keanu found a quiet corner in an airport cafe. He sipped his coffee, read on his phone, and pondered what it was that drove people to such anger. Often, behind aggression lies deeper pain or disappointment. He knew no one is born hateful. Life's hardships or personal tragedies can drive a person to lash out at the world. Still, this man's behavior was extreme, clearly making life miserable for everyone around him. Eventually, Keanu finished his coffee and approached the boarding gate for his flight. As fate would have it, the loud, angry man from before was booked on the same flight. Keanu wondered how many conflicts might still lie ahead, especially in the confined cabin of a plane. Some people around them whispered to one another, already uneasy about having this hot-headed passenger on board. Passengers lined up to board. Some hurried to secure a window seat or overhead bin space. Keanu blended into the crowd, hoping for a peaceful flight but suspecting the drama was far from over. Sure enough, the moment he stepped onto the plane, he could hear the man's raised voice. The older passenger was already demanding that his seat be changed immediately, threatening a scene like they'd never seen if his wish wasn't granted. Second location, on the plane. Inside the aircraft, tensions rose in the cramped space. Rows of tight seats, narrow aisles, and a fully booked flight magnified every complaint. Keanu took a seat in economy class, not wanting to flash any special status. He placed his backpack under the seat and observed the uneasy expressions of the passengers nearby. People were clearly worried about the commotion a few rows away, where the gray-haired man was once again arguing with the flight attendants. He complained about anything and everything: shoddy customer service, indifferent cabin crew, and even the fact that other passengers were in his way. At one point, a fellow traveler tried to explain that there was only so much space in the aisle, but the older man barked back, telling him to just move. Keanu sighed inwardly, hoping the man would calm down once the plane was in the air. Yet something told him the man's anger went beyond simple discomfort. It felt like a deep-seated frustration with life, misdirected at everyone around him. As the pilot announced the upcoming takeoff and asked everyone to fasten seatbelts, the grumbling man again voiced his outrage. Why should I turn off my phone? I have important business calls. Who's going to compensate me if I miss them? A flight attendant politely explained. Sir, it's for safety reasons. Once we reach cruising altitude, you can use your phone in airplane mode. Ugh, safety rules, he muttered. Most passengers tried to avoid making eye contact. A few stole glances at Keanu, as though recognizing him, but no one dared to say anything that might spark more anger from the older man. Keanu watched from his seat, thinking that if the situation worsened, he might have to intervene again. The plane took off, ascending above a quilt of early morning clouds. Passengers relaxed a bit, hoping to settle in. But as soon as the seatbelt sign was turned off, the man stood up and began pacing the aisle, bumping into legs, knocking knees against seat edges, and grumbling every few steps. How is anyone supposed to fly like this? He lamented loudly. It's cramped, it's stuffy. Who designed these seats anyway? Other travelers did their best not to react. Then came a small accident that threatened to become a flashpoint. As the man was passing by, he hit a woman's seat, causing her to spill juice onto her dress. Hey! Be careful, she exclaimed, jumping up to blot away the stain. You could have at least warned me. This isn't my fault, he shot back. You shouldn't be flailing your arms around. I wasn't flailing anything, she retorted. You nearly fell on top of me. Her companion, likely her husband, stepped in. Look, we're all sick of your shouting. Can't you calm down and let people travel in peace? We're all in the same boat here. Oh, another know-it-all, the old man scoffed. Who gave you the right to tell me what to do? Maybe you're a wannabe flight attendant too. At that point, nearby passengers began pressing the call button for help. The situation was on the verge of spiraling out of control. Sensing this, Keanu rose from his seat a couple of rows away, carefully making his way down the aisle and gently asking fellow travelers to let him pass. Pardon me, he said, thank you for moving aside. He approached the upset passenger, who looked ready to unleash another torrent of insults. A flight attendant also moved closer, looking uneasy. Excuse me for interfering, Keanu began calmly, but I see you bumped into this lady and her companion. Maybe you could at least say you're sorry before the situation escalates further. The older man recognized the same do-gooder from the airport. His eyes narrowed. You again. Think I'll back off just because you're acting like some hero in front of everyone? Forget it. I'm not trying to be a hero, Keanu replied softly. I just want us all to reach our destination without more arguments. We share this plane, after all. The man gave a bitter chuckle. You think I care what any of you want? I paid for my ticket, so I can move around or shout if I please. A faint voice came from a nearby elderly woman. Young man, please calm down. I'm begging you. My heart isn't very strong. We don't need more fighting. Oh, quiet down, Granny, he snapped, causing several people to recoil in shock. If you don't like the noise, put on some headphones. An uneasy hush fell on the cabin. Some were visibly appalled at his disrespect. A flight attendant stepped forward, but Keanu gently leaned toward the man, speaking in a quiet but firm tone. You're crossing a line. You can be upset, but you can't disrespect others, staff, seniors, or anyone else. That's not how we solve problems. Oh yeah? What are you going to do about it? The man snarled. Keanu felt a lump form in his throat. This was no trivial matter. On a plane, disorderly conduct can have serious repercussions. The pilot could call the police upon landing or even make an emergency stop if things got out of hand. Keanu didn't want the man to hurt himself or anyone else through his actions. How about this? Keanu offered. I see you're upset, maybe tired, or have something troubling you. I'm willing to listen. Just no more shouting or name-calling, okay? Sit down, and let's talk it through. The man stared at him incredulously, clearly unused to such a calm response. Passengers around them watched, perplexed that anyone would voluntarily engage with such a volatile person. Many wondered, why doesn't someone just force him to sit down? Why is this stranger offering to talk? But Keanu believed there was a better way. Why should you care? The man finally muttered, turning away. People like you don't understand what it's like, he hesitated before finishing. When you've worked your whole life, and no one needs you anymore. Then the flight gets delayed, more issues pile on. And everyone else just annoys me. Beneath all the yelling, people caught a glimpse of raw bitterness. They realized they weren't just dealing with a self-absorbed tyrant, but someone in pain who had chosen an unfortunate way to express it. I do understand, Keanu answered, carefully choosing his words. Sometimes we feel the world ignores our efforts. But taking it out on others isn't the solution. Oh, so you're a psychologist now? The man jeered. No, just a regular person, Keanu replied with a slight shrug. I've gone through difficulties, too, lost close loved ones. He paused, recalling moments of personal loss. But I always believed that people are stronger when they help each other, not tear one another down. The man exhaled sharply, looking torn. His anger had cooled, though he wasn't quite ready to embrace a peaceful resolution. Perhaps the confined space, the gazes of fellow passengers, and Keanu's unflappable composure forced him to tone it down. The flight attendants, previously at a loss, appeared relieved to see the confrontation losing steam. One of them timidly addressed the man. Sir, please, would you return to your seat? We'll be serving drinks soon. I can bring you tea or water. Fine, he grumbled, just let me sit properly. He marched back to his seat, muttering under his breath but no longer yelling. Keanu stepped aside to let him pass and then walked to the back of the plane, giving him some space. Many passengers whispered their relief. Some speculated that the man might be met by airport security upon landing to discuss his behavior. Keanu settled into his seat again. He trusted the flight crew's training but also sensed his words had some effect. Maybe it was enough to get through the rest of the journey without further incidents. Mid-flight, the flight attendants began serving drinks and snacks. Passengers gradually relaxed, reading magazines, watching movies on tablets, or dozing off. Keanu sipped water while gazing out the window at the clouds. Then he noticed movement a few rows ahead. The man left his seat, presumably heading to the lavatory. As he passed Keanu, their eyes met. Keanu saw less fury and more exhaustion there, as if the older man wanted to say something but held back. A few minutes later, returning from the lavatory, the man surprised everyone by sitting in an empty seat near Keanu's row. Those around them watched anxiously, unsure if he was about to start trouble again. Instead, he sighed heavily. I don't get what you're after, he said in a low voice. Usually, people just walk away. But you keep trying to be nice. Who are you? Keanu smiled. Believe it or not, I'm just a guy, he said. You might have heard of me somewhere, but that's not important. My name's Keanu. Keanu, the man frowned, as if trying to recall if he'd heard it before. Like that actor? Keanu gave a small shrug. Well, yeah, there's an actor by that name, he said in a half-joking tone. The man studied Keanu's face, his hair, the simple outfit he wore. Something clicked, but he still didn't fully grasp he was sitting beside a worldwide celebrity. Maybe he simply didn't follow Hollywood movies. Fine, he said quietly, let's say you are just another passenger. Sorry I snapped at you earlier. It's just. He paused, unable to finish the thought. It seemed like the closest he'd come to an actual apology. Keanu nodded appreciatively. Thanks. We all make mistakes, but if there's a chance to set things right, it's worth trying. The man didn't reply, simply got up and returned to his seat. Passengers noted that he seemed less agitated, no longer glaring at everyone. The flight began its descent. A voice from the cockpit announced they would soon land and asked everyone to restore their seats to the upright position. An air of mild tension common to landings filled the cabin. Many people get nervous at touchdown. At that point, the older man looked back at Keanu, studying his calm but kind face, and finally mustered the courage to ask. "Hey, are you, actually that actor?" Keanu didn't deny it, seeing no point in hiding now. "Yes," he answered simply. "So why are you flying economy in plain clothes?" the man asked, still perplexed. "Couldn't you afford first class?" "Probably," Keanu said. "But there's no need if I'm comfortable here. Plus, it's nice to be among ordinary people rather than shut off behind fancy curtains." The man just nodded, processing this idea that a famous global star would choose to blend in. He seemed embarrassed as he recalled how he'd been shouting at employees, insulting random passengers, and even telling off an elderly woman, while sitting just a few rows away from an actor admired worldwide for his humility. The realization made him flush with shame. "Damn," he muttered, looking away. "You listened to all those insults, and you never lashed out back." "I didn't see the point in answering anger with anger," Keanu said, fastening his seatbelt. "I believe kindness goes further." The man rubbed his forehead, as though wiping away sweat. At that moment, he looked neither angry nor triumphant, just embarrassed. Sorry, I acted like a fool," he finally said, staring at the floor. "I've got a lot of problems going on." "Yeah, I know that doesn't excuse what I did, but it explains that there's pain behind the anger," Keanu replied gently. "And I realize life can be unfair. I do hope things get better for you." The man exhaled, at a loss for words. Meanwhile, the plane's wheels met the runway, jolting the cabin. After taxiing, the pilot confirmed a safe arrival, thanking the passengers for choosing their airline. When the plane came to a complete stop, people rose to retrieve their bags from the overhead compartments. Flight attendants opened the doors, and fresh air from the jet bridge wafted into the cabin. Passengers were eager to disembark. Keanu waited until the main rush ended before grabbing his carry-on. Just then, the older man approached him again, looking conflicted. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "And, sorry for almost causing a scene the whole flight. I see now how ridiculous I must have looked." Keanu gave a slight nod. "I think what matters isn't how we look in the middle of a conflict, but what we learn from it. Take care. I hope things improve for you." "Thanks," the man replied, still sounding unsure. "Never thought I'd actually talk to, well. And I guess I never really knew what you looked like." He managed a half-smile, seeming more human than ever. Keanu returned the smile. As the man moved on, several passengers offered quiet smiles of their own, relieved the tension had finally passed. They stepped onto the bridge leading to the arrival terminal. Everyday concerns returned, connecting flights, picking up luggage, reuniting with loved ones. Yet it felt like a small moral victory had been won that day. Keanu saw the man from a distance, now calmly speaking with airport staff and a security officer who had likely been called in. From the staff's polite demeanor, it seemed the situation was under control. The older man no longer appeared defiant. Keanu made his way through the arrival area, where crowds gathered to greet friends or family. Some recognized him, while others walked past without a clue that he was the famous star. He preferred it that way. He'd helped avert a larger meltdown, not because he sought recognition, but because it felt right to offer a little kindness to someone who seemed lost in anger. Outside the glass doors, the city lights and a line of waiting cars came into view. The events of this flight stayed with him, a mixture of regret that the man had been so close to harming his own peace and relief that he'd pulled back from the brink. Keanu believed that, deep down, the man might reconsider his behavior, maybe even spark a positive change in himself. Sometimes all it takes is a simple mirror, revealing our flaws. And anyone might play that role, a caring stranger, or, in this case, a beloved actor known for his humility, resolution and moral. At last, Keanu got into a taxi, settling into the back seat with a weary sigh. His thoughts flickered back to the final images of the flight, angry outbursts, the wary glances from fellow passengers, the tense silence in the cabin, and that moment the man realized who was in front of him, as if seeing himself from the outside. Keanu believed such encounters are never random. Perhaps, in his own way, that passenger had been hoping someone would stop him before he went too far. After all, we are all human. We each have moments when irritation and pain cloud our judgment. But if just one person responds with compassion instead of returning hostility, everything can change. Though the flight began with negative energy, it ended on a note of reflection and understanding. The world can be harsh, but if we remember to stay human, there's always hope. This story contains no superhero feats. Keanu didn't save a plane from disaster or perform a grand heroic act. He merely showed kindness, attention, and empathy. Yet isn't that where real strength lies? The power to disarm even the angriest soul. Stepping out of the taxi, Keanu looked around at a new city, fresh air, and limitless possibilities. He knew no one would shower him with applause for preventing another person's meltdown, and he didn't need it. Enough to know that one troubled individual might reflect on this encounter and perhaps help someone else down the road. That's how a chain of goodness begins, not with grand gestures, but with small everyday choices we make to be kind. We never know when we'll face aggression or injustice. We can't control someone else's behavior, but we can control our own. Sometimes a single individual's decision to answer anger with empathy can change the outcome. That's the simple truth Keanu Reeves, unassuming yet loved worldwide, confirmed once again in this short flight. Friends, if this story moved you, hold on to its core message: a calm word and genuine kindness can break any wave of negativity. And it doesn't matter if you're a famous actor or an ordinary passerby. What matters is the heart you bring to each encounter. Even a brief conversation or small gesture of respect can be a ray of light in someone's dark world. Thank you for watching and listening to the very end. Take care of yourselves, and don't lose your kindness toward others, even when they're not at their best. As our hero showed, each of us can be that one person who steps in at just the right moment, salvaging not only someone's mood but possibly their entire future. Leave your comments, share your thoughts and impressions, and above all, never forget the power of compassion and empathy. See you next time.